Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good following morning. Today it's AMA number 53. 53 as we start our second year of AMAs. Hard to believe, but there it is. Today is March 25th, also known around the world as the day that season 3 of Shtizel drops on Netflix. Of course, if you're Israeli, then you have Shtizel without the subtitles, and you've had it for quite a couple months already. But for those of us who watch it with need the subtitles, and I watch it with Kasha at home, so we watch with subtitles. Today is Shtizel Day with subtitles on Netflix. So if anybody has watched it already, and no spoilers, please don't write anything. Season 2. What do you mean season 2, episode 1? Good morning, Jeffrey. I thought it's season 3. Benji, I like how these start 1 or 2 minutes late to keep us in suspense. Exactly. It has nothing to do with any technical difficulties or somebody forgetting to go live at the right time or do it correctly. It's absolutely to keep everything in suspense. But anyway, good morning, Benji Lovett and Jeffrey. Where is Saul Schachter? The other. Hi, and Sita. Hi, Sita. My dad is watching. Hello, Dad. Good Yontif, Dad. Good Yontif. Chag Sameach to you and to all. Season 2 of the AMA. Season 3 of Shtizel. I was so excited about Shtizel that I got lost in with the understanding the difference between Shtizel and the AMA. One day maybe I'll have guests from Shtizel on. I should say that UJA didn't. No, it wasn't UJA. It was Temple Emmanuel, I guess, the Stryker Center. A couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, did an event about Shtizel, and it wasn't wildly fantastic. Although the room was full of Shtizel fanatics. But there you go. Hello, Chuck Fishman. Hello, Rabbi Avi. Hello, Saul. There you are. Greetings from Long Island. Hi, Saul. Oh, good morning, Marcel. Marcel from Montreal. And please send love to Marilla. How are you, Marcel? Okay. Usual suspects tuning in. Good to see everybody. What's going on in Poland? COVID situation, very, very bad. Actually, the Prime Minister and the Minister of Health this morning had a press conference, and they are shutting down. So we already last week shut more things down. Now, as of Monday, or as of tomorrow, really, Saturday, sorry, kindergartens are shut down. Construction furniture stores, like people were doing like the DIY stores, big box stores, shut down. Hairdressers, beauty salons, they're trying to limit the amount of people. Of course, churches are still open, which is good for synagogues, but they're limiting the amount of people and have asked everybody not to travel. Traditionally, of course, we have Pesach, and next week is Easter Sunday, Good Friday, Easter Sunday. We have people travel, go home, students, people who live who have family. A lot of people in the last 30 years or so have moved to the big cities from the smaller towns and villages, so they go back to their family for Easter, and they we'll see how that will affect people. But the case is very, very bad. 34,000 cases today. Wait for it, the highest ever. New record of cases today, 34,000 cases. So very, very bad. Hopefully closing things down will help. Oh, Kasha Leonardi. Hello, Kasha. Kasha, you can call me after the AMA. So yeah, we're in a very difficult corona situation. People still continue to very slowly get vaccinated, but we are way behind. I think we're at something like 5 million vaccinated, 4 or 5 million vaccinated. Actually, I have the exact numbers in front of me. Sorry about that. 5.3. My crack staff here has put it together. 5.3 million vaccinated, so that's good, but we have lots and lots of cases, so we are shutting down, having to shut down, which is hopefully will help things. And that's where we are. What's going on out besides that? I am doing a few day juice cleanse, juice and veggie, sort of just drinking, throwing everything in the Vitamix. So since Sunday night is the last time I had any like food, since then I've just been juicing everything. But don't worry, I'm not in any worse mood than usual. You can take that to mean whatever you take that to mean. I am in I am not in any worse mood than I usually am, and I'm enjoying that. I just no real reason to do it. I don't even know if it does anything, but I just felt like we were just eating a lot of crap lately. Perhaps it had to do with 4 or 5 kilos of ice cream in my fridge that we were eating, just pulling out giant containers of ice cream after dinner every day and eating all that. But that's what happens when you are married to Kasha Leonardi. Comes with certain responsibilities. One of those is to provide ice cream and to be an ice cream eating partner. And I am a good ice cream eating partner. So I have to go through a bit of a detox, a pre-Pesach detox. And then we'll see. I think that all the juice and veggies just shakes for a few days, and then a few days of matzah, that everything will be balanced out after that. So Pesach coming up Saturday night. I have to say, as a picky eater, as a kid who had to observe all these holidays, oh, I'm sorry, my dad's watching, who willingly and lovingly observed all these holidays, I always hated Pesach. Pesach was always a holiday. I couldn't stand it. Why? Because I always felt I had nothing to eat. Because as a kid, I primarily ate pizza, peanut butter sandwiches, and Reese's peanut butter cups. All three of those things not allowed for Pesach. So I felt like I was always somewhat starving during Pesach. What was fun though in Pesach as a kid is we used to go away sometime to hotels. So in the Catskills, think Dirty Dancing. They were pretty much exactly like that. And that was a lot of fun going away to hotels. So you didn't have to, a lot of Jews do it. So you don't have to clean up everything and dechumitzify your house. So that was a lot of fun as a kid. And these days, Pesach is much better here. Usually in Krakow, we have a huge first Seder, a bunch of different Seders going on. 2 years ago was we had 150 for Pesach. And this year, of course, we are not doing it in person. What we will do is, what we all have been doing is delivering Pesach packages. So Kasha, for the last 2 days, first of all, she koshered the kitchen in the JCC, and then she cooked haroset and all the different food and egg and everything there is for the Seder plate. And we sent out about 100 care packages to different families and not packages of Passover Pesach food for the Seder. So she cooked everything or prepared everything for the Seder plate and put it all individually, wrapped everything, put it all in and gave some educational material and some matzah, and we went and delivered those to people, which was really nice for Pesach. So although we won't be in person, we were able to cook and help everybody in Krakow that wants to celebrate Pesach. We also will have an online Seder Saturday night that'll be led by community members along with Or Hadash, members of the Reform community here, because they can go on during Yontif, can go online. So they're helping us with the Seder. We'll do it in conjunction with them. Should be a lot of fun. There you go. So that's Pesach coming up, and it's holiday season, and things are really pretty quiet here in Poland. There were some questions. Oh, let's see, Randy. You had the reverse. You love Pesach, so you look forward to it. Many of your husband cooks all the traditional Pesach foods the way your grandmother did. Oh, really nice, Randy. I have to say though, as a kid growing up, I never understood. Everybody was like, "Oh, I gained so much weight in Pesach and Pesach." I never understood it because I've just always been starving. So me, it was like, how much matzah can you eat? I understand that matzah just generally sort of, gets stuck in you and all that, but I just felt like it wasn't that exciting. Matzah surprisingly has a lot of calories. It doesn't seem like it would, right? Because it seems like it's a wasa, like a wasfa crisp bread or a rice cake type thing. But matzah is surprisingly caloric. Jeffrey's asking, how is Pani Zosha? Pani Zosha is doing all right. Pani Zosha had an operation. She has a lot of pain in her back. So she had an operation on some nerves in her back to try to help. And she's doing okay, but she can't really move too much. So we brought her, I posted on Facebook, I guess you saw, many of you saw, hopefully. We went over there to visit her yesterday and brought her a tablet and taught her, put Zoom on it for her and helped her use that. So she's pretty actually computer savvy, just lying in bed. She couldn't get to her desktop, so we helped her with that. And we are doing that for any of our seniors that need help with the internet, that need to get online. We'll provide them hopefully we'll be able to provide them with a tablet and get them online so they can be connected. Something that hopefully that won't last very long. We thought this would be over by now, but it's not, and we are still where we are. Okay. Have I been in touch with Bernard since the Washington Post article? Ruth Ellen Gruber asked. No, I haven't. There was a nice Washington Post article about an organization called Kavod in the US, and they sort of how they help survivors. They photograph and help survivors around the US. Bernard was photographed wearing a JCC Ride for the Living jersey, which was nice. The article sadly didn't mention that the Kavod guys, the Prugelmans, met Bernard, of course, in Krakow when they were all here together on the ride, but a very nice article. And I will be speaking with Bernard. I'll try to speak to him before Yom Tov, before the Chag begins. Is Centropa the latest Christopher Nolan picture? Benji asks. Yeah. Benji, that's why you are one of the top 1,000 leading Jewish comedians working today from Israel as an expat, because you are a very clever guy. Centropa does sound like it could be a Christopher Nolan picture. And I'll tell you what, if Centropa were a Christopher Nolan picture, I would go see it as a big Christopher Nolan fan. Ola Pulnik says she misses matzo balls and soup. Don't we all? So I like matzo balls, but I don't like, and I like matzo ball soup if it's vegan, but I don't do the chicken matzo ball soup. So I like when people have chicken soup with matzo balls, if I'm over, I always ask for the matzo balls separately, which maybe sounds a bit strange, but life of a vegetarian is what it is. So with no further ado, I am going to invite my friend who I described as a real Renaissance man. He absolutely is. He is a filmmaker. He is a writer. He is a photographer. He is the director of a Jewish Historical Institute called Centropa. We're based out of Vienna, and he is everywhere. I firmly believe, like people say that there are many, many Elvises. He's spotted all over. There can't be just one. I think there is more than one Ed Sirota, since I run into him everywhere in the world. We're connected. Ed Sirota's name comes up in my life when I'm traveling the world 6 or 7 times a day. It doesn't matter where I am or what the context is. So you are a remarkable guy, Ed Sirota. And let's get to the bottom of the question on everybody's mind. Who is Ed Sirota? How are you, my friend?
Well, first, it's wonderful to see you, Jonathan. I'm sorry that we're not hanging out together as we often do, as we stay at the same lovely apartment in New York at Cheryl Fishbein and Phil Shatton's, where we stay up late at night and kibitz all evening. I miss that. I need
solve
that.
The world. We stay up late at night and we solve all the problems of the Jewish world.
No, you do that.
No. That's what we do. And strangely, then we go to sleep and all the problems are still there the next morning.
Yeah, which gives us something to talk about the next day. So I was born in the holy city of Savannah, Georgia.
The beautiful city of Savannah, which I recently visited. Beautiful.
Lucky you. When I lived there, was growing up in the 1950s, it wasn't charming. It was just old.
But you had this you have the beautiful synagogue.
Well, that's the synagogue we don't go to.
Oh, you don't go to the I'll tell you, they brought me, I gave a talk for the Federation, and they said, they're very proud of this, the other synagogue. And the rabbi he said, I'll bring you at 10 o'clock at night. He turned the lights on, let me in. He's showing me the letter from this president and that president. And that's the synagogue you didn't go to.
Savannah's a port city, and like all port cities, it was always a multi-ethnic, multicultural city. That's what port cities are. So in growing up in Savannah, which was a small town, it was when I lived there was around 80,000 people, but there was, for every national day, there was a parade. There was the St. Patrick's Day parade, there was Columbus Day parade, there were all sorts of parades in town, and it just relished and celebrated the multi-ethnic character of the city. Plus, there was a big Air Force base, so there were big Air Force parades and et cetera, et cetera. So all of that was great, and I thought I was living in a big city. And then Savannah was founded in the 1700s, and in so doing, the first Jews who came there came with the British, and they were Sephardim. Most of those, not all, but most of those died out. Then came the German Jews in the middle 1800s, and they're the ones who built the Mikveh Israel, this Gothic church, it looked like, and actually had been there even before that because I had a letter from George Washington, and then the East European Unserleute came to Savannah starting in the 1880s, 1890s, and that was the East Europeans. And those are the ones who basically breathed life into all Jewish communities in America. The Shtetl Yidden fleeing from Belarus and Poland, and at that time, you know, the 1890s when people could get in until 1920 something. So growing up in Savannah, we were members of the Orthodox synagogue downtown. This is also a time when American Jewry wasn't terribly Orthodox as it is now. So it was what we would definitely call modern Orthodox. I remember Rabbi Rosenberg, part of his contract is he was given a new pink Thunderbird convertible every year to drive through the streets of Savannah, and played poker with my father every Thursday night.
Pink Thunderbird. Now that's
convertible.
I like these conditions for Jewish community leaders.
Yes, it should happen to us. And so I was 13. But I went to services every Saturday so that my friends and I could go to junior congregation, we called it, go upstairs to our grandfathers and fathers and schnorr some money, which they had money in the synagogue on the Saturday, and they'd slip us $1, and then we would go to a double feature horror movie show. But synagogue was part of my life every week. For the first time, I was 13 years old, and I went to the Mikveh Israel, this Reformed temple, which nobody had ever mentioned before. I knew where it was, but someone took me there on a Friday night. I was agog. I came home that night, and I asked my mother, I said, is there such a thing as Christian Jews? And she said, what are you talking about? I said, I think I just discovered them. And I wasn't saying it to be judgmental or cynical as I am now, but I was completely shocked that there could be men and women sitting together, that there could be an organ and a choir. No one had ever told me, and it hit me as a body blow. And I went, you know, actually, it's pretty good. It's pretty nice. So that's my background. I then went to the University of Tennessee.
But before, let me ask you just a little bit about Savannah growing up, just because people, I think, are always interested. This idea of, I think for a lot of American Jews, I think the beginning and end of their idea of Judaism in the South is driving Miss Daisy. You know, I don't think that there's much of an awareness historically about, well, of course, I'm not counting Florida as the South, but in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, of course, you know, these Jewish communities that have been vibrant. You know, Savannah's it has been a vibrant Jewish community for a while. What was it like in terms of growing up there? I mean, because I have to ask you, as we all are obsessed with anti-Semitism and all of that, did you feel? I mean, what was it like?
The
60s.
Yeah. Well, you know, to follow it through is that East European Jewry settled all over the South. They had been traders and merchants, most of them, and they were guys who couldn't make a living in New York, and they came to one shtetl after another in the South. They would come to a small town. They would see there was no store there, so they'd take off their peddler's backpack and set up Goldbergs, Richardsons, Richelsons, Cohens, and there was always a Jewish store on the main street, and then the relatives would come and they would be settled in places like Sumter, South Carolina, Dublin, Georgia, all of these places. The way that Jews maintained their their lives during the Depression, and then later all the way through the 50s and 60s, is they clung very closely together. My father had to have his bar mitzvah in the B'nai B'rith Jacob, the Orthodox synagogue. His own father and mother couldn't come to the synagogue, and this is in the 1930s. And so he would then come back to Stillmore, Georgia, which was a crossroads. And he told me that they went on a picnic by a bend in the river where he cited his Haftorah for the family and for a few friends who came. And then they went back to their very poor existences of eking out a living, trading with farmers. Now, by the Second World War created the big economic boom in the United States. Of course, as we know, there was America basically won the Second World War and came out industrially the powerhouse of the world, and that affected all of us. And so the Jewish communities, these guys who came back from the Second World War went to universities on the GI Bill. And as soon as their kids could, they would leave these towns and go to the bigger cities. They would leave Fayetteville and Florence, South Carolina, where Ben Bernanke's family was from, et cetera, and they would move to the bigger cities, and many of these places were abandoned. That said, Jewish life in the South was always very, very strong and very supportive of each other. You went to this, and I lived in Savannah in the 50s and early 60s before we moved to Chattanooga, which was not a whole lot bigger. You lived inside of a Jewish bubble. You went to regular public schools, but every afternoon you would go to Hebrew school, where elderly Holocaust survivors would slap you over the face if you got your vowels wrong in reading Hebrew. You're worse than the Nazis if you can't get your vowels right, or you can't go play basketball in the JCC gym if you don't read this faster. So it was always a great way of Jewish education. But nevertheless, the communities were...
Sounds like Catholic education too.
It certainly does. And it was, I have to, we have a small public here, but I have to say something that I don't admit to many people, but I remember being around 4 years old when I could figure out the difference between a Gentile and an African American. And the only thing I knew is from my parents and their friends, you had to be nice to both of them because they paid retail. And that's, I'm ashamed to say that, but this is how close the Jewish community was in small town, in the small town South. You went to the same Jewish summer camps every year, and you would go for 8 weeks during the summer. Most people can't imagine taking a 7-year-old and dumping him in a summer camp for 8 weeks, which of course we did. And there were a few big Jewish summer camps in the South, Barney Mednitz for Atlanta kids and Blue Star for most of them. But I would really describe growing up Jewish in the South as something really terrific. Now, we didn't have the kind of store that, let's say, where friends of mine in Birmingham didn't have a big department store where somebody in this department store decided that they would promote the shoe shine guy, who was an African American, to being a sales clerk. When he did that, he had his windows broken the next day. And Jewish merchants during the civil rights period definitely had a problem because they were caught in between. Most of them were, many of them, but not all, were liberal minded and wanted to help, but they certainly suffered the slings and arrows of people who didn't want to shop with them. So you have this kind of problem in the South for sure.
Mirroring certain situations in the North, where Jews also were, in many cases, the shop owners and shop owners in Jewish neighborhoods that then very quickly changed and became more African American and other minority neighborhoods, and that sort of unease between the people shopping in a neighborhood where they don't own the store. So I mean, I guess there's a long history, whether in the South and the North, different on different paths, but some sort of connection. Ed, I want to jump a little bit forward because you and I will talk, and I will spend the whole time talking to you only about life in Savannah, and you've done so many interesting things. I want to jump ahead. I want to talk about 1985. You go to Central Europe to work on a project, and that becomes a book, Out of the Shadows, and inspired by a meeting with a rabbi in Romania. So maybe, and this was your beginning, as I understand it. Really, sort of this has become your life's work. We're talking about this is already 35 years later, and you essentially, besides hanging out with me at Cheryl and Phil's apartment on 84th Street, you essentially have never left. So maybe talk about this initial experience in 1985. You didn't understand you were staying in Europe, or this must have been an absolutely phenomenal change that you went through to be able to shift your life that you then saved. So maybe talk about that initial, what happened to Ed Sirota in 1985 in Romania.
Well, in 1935, I was already 35 years old, and I had tried my hand at different jobs and all sorts of things, and I was miserable at all of them. And I decided I wanted to be a writer and a photographer. But I knew that at the age of 35, that was too late to go to a newspaper and start on the ground floor writing obituaries and sports and photographing sports. That's what you do in your early 20s. So at 35, that would have made me like this kind of an oddball. So I figured I'd have to do something that was different. And I went Central Europe. Nobody goes there. And I was living in Atlanta by then. Who here can write about Budapest, Vienna, and Prague? So I started making trips to this part of the world. My first trip was to Prague, Vienna, and Budapest in the winter of 84, 85. Wrote a lot of articles for it, did rather well with it. And then I decided to go.
At a freelance point, just as a freelancer selling the articles, different magazines.
Exactly. And then in 85, December 85, I went to, that was a Habsburg trip, the Prague, Vienna, Budapest. I decided for the newspapers I was writing for to do an Ottoman trip. So I took trains around the Balkans from Istanbul to Sofia to Bucharest and to Belgrade and back to Istanbul, something I don't necessarily recommend to the lighthearted. But while I was in Bucharest, I saw a synagogue. I went, look at that, a synagogue. Here I am, 35 years old. I haven't been to a synagogue since I was bar mitzvahed at the B'nai B'rith Jacob in Savannah in 1963. What the hell? Let's go in. I went in. They said, oh, go talk to the chief rabbi. Rabbi Rosen was sat there. The first thing he did is the chief rabbi, he was about 5.5 feet round, and he pulled out a bottle of Slivovitz plum brandy, poured us each a glass. We started talking, and I was making notes. I said, how many Jews do you have here? He said, we have this, we're 20,000, they're leaving, they're dying, and we're not reproducing. And I said, well, where do they go? He said, what do you mean, where do they go? They go to Israel. I said, all of them? He poured another drink, and he said, Sirota, we're Jews. Where should we go? Philadelphia? And he then sent me to the kosher canteen that was run by the Jewish community. And I'm sitting there with another glass of Slivovitz, and they served me a piece of brisket the size of a Manhattan telephone book, and a knödel the size of a bowling ball, and a big bottle of spritzer. And I'm loving this. And I'm saying and I'm looking at everybody around me and all the faces, and I say, you know, this is just like Savannah. And I went, wait a minute. This is not like Savannah. Savannah is like this place. And I said, oh yeah. This is like the old country. And I went, it's not like the old country. It is the old country, and I'm in it. And from that minute, I decided, why would I ever leave? Why would I go back to Atlanta?
Ed, don't you think for Americans that we're unique in many ways, but I think one of them is that although our country is hundreds, if not thousands of years younger than other countries, we're so America-centric that it's automatic. Oh my God, if we see something that looks like, I think it's almost like you're from Las Vegas and you go to Venice and you're like, oh my God, this looks just like, it looks like our Venetian hotel. It's fascinating how we have a point of view of seeing everything through the prism of America, whereas I think other countries, they're much more aware the fact that they are a part of the whole planet. And we just think that, I think the world sometimes is divided, there's America and then there's just sort of the rest. And of course there's little differences among the rest, but it's sort of us and them as opposed to just various pieces.
It's not just us. I remember I took when I was helping some people get out of Bosnia during the war there in the mid-90s.
We're gonna get to that.
And I brought one kid, and he's from Sarajevo. Now, if you've ever been to Sarajevo, half the city looks like Istanbul and the other half looks like Vienna. And so when this 14-year-old kid and his father were there, we were walking around Vienna because I was getting them visas to go to Israel. And he said, "Boy, this looks like Sarajevo." I said, "No, Dennis, Sarajevo looks like Vienna." He said, "Oh, I don't know, Uncle Ed. Those buildings in Sarajevo are pretty old." Yeah. So, he had that. We all have that view of the world. So but what was interesting to me, and this will appeal to you, and it's why we get along, like joined at the hips. What I saw in Central Europe when I came back, what the numbers for me never counted. It was the dignity of the effort. It's the story. The story of Jews in Central and Eastern Europe is basically the story of redemption. Now that cuts ahead to 4 years after 1989. But even it was always the dignity of the effort that moved me so much when I was traveling in the 1980s, even before the fall of communism. It moved me greatly. It needed to be documented. It needed to be written about, and it moved me to eventually set up an oral history institute.
But that was much more. So you have this idea. You do a book about Out of the Shadows, right? About what you'd seen. Did you decide at that moment that you decided already that you would then stay in Europe? You understood that this was going to be something you.
I've never, although I'm finally in the process of getting my Austrian passport. I never had any. I never thought that far ahead. I would just simply go to the next project. I had no intention of go. Every project I did meant that I had no reason to think about leaving because there was always something more to do. So my first book, Out of the Shadows, was a survey and photographs about Jewish life in Central and Eastern Europe under communism and the very beginning of after the fall of communism and how these communities rebuilt themselves. So that came out in 1991. Then I moved to Berlin and I was doing a book on Jews and Germans because it's such a fascinating relationship. And I went looking for yekas in Los Angeles, London, and Tel Aviv, and then looking into how Germans relate to Jews and how the Jews of Germany relate to each other. And it's all fascinating. But in the middle of that came the war in Bosnia, and I was living in Berlin at the time, and Tom Gelton of National Public Radio had just come out of Bosnia, and he said, "You really ought to go there." He says, "There's no real story in this for NPR, nothing big, but there's a whole story. You got a crazy group of Jews running at the synagogue. They're Holocaust survivors. They're running a humanitarian aid agency with Muslims, Serbs, and Croats."
I get you. Maybe we should really talk a little bit about that because it's a story that I think, I'll tell you that World Jewish Relief did a program the other day about which is and we did the previous one about Poland, and I was watching it and I listened, and of course that story from the inside, and you're not only know that story, you're part of that story. But for someone like me, who of course of course I'm probably vaguely aware at least of most sort of major things that went on, but didn't know it in any detail the way that it is. And I turned it on, I was having dinner, and I was transfixed listening to Yechiel Bar Chaim just talk about, in a matter-of-fact, deadpan way, talking about this way, and we did this, and we bribed this one, and we understood this, and we got this people out, and we did this airlift, and we realized that we could save the rest, and the Jews were the ones who were the ones who were trusted by everybody. It's an unbelievable story, and I want you to talk a little bit about it. And to me, this is such a Spielberg film.
It's a lot of things, and it certainly is. It would be that or something else. And
in terms of I say that in terms of what medium these days is able to reach the most people. So of course books about it in this, but I'm saying it's like to me it's such an amazing, like nail biter.
It certainly is. The basic story for those watching is that what we have here is just as a small bit of background, is that when the Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492, they went to several places, but the majority of them went across the Mediterranean and eventually found their home in the ever-expanding Ottoman Empire, which was then had now conquered most of the Balkans. The Ottoman Empire was an expanding empire built on conquest. It needed Armenians, Greeks, Jews, and others to do the trade. And that's been in silversmithing, tinsmithing, all this kind of stuff, medicine, all the trades that Jews actually brought with them from Spain. And so they were welcomed in the Balkans. You had over close to 100,000 Sephardic Jews that settled in Salonika, Thessaloniki, if you can imagine. And then they were all over the Balkans. In Sarajevo, they certainly were there. They were around 12% of the population, and Sarajevo was in Bosnia, or Bosnia was in the Ottoman Empire till 1878. Then the Austrians took it. Then, of course, we know about the Austrian Archduke that happened to visit Sarajevo on the wrong day. And he was shot along with his wife, Sophie, on the 28th of June, 1914. We know what happened. After that, there was the independent state of Yugoslavia, which no one liked, those inside of it, except for the Serbs, who more or less dominated it. And then came the Holocaust. Germany invaded on the 6th of April, 1941. The vast majority of Jews in the Balkans were slaughtered. Those who in ex-Yugoslavia were saved either because they got to Italy or they were saved by going into Tito's partisans. Comes after the Second World War, those who were religious left, but there was a core of people who stayed. Jews in Sarajevo basically didn't understand how you wouldn't like your neighbors. We've been living with Serbs, Croats, and Muslims forever. Manashtana halala hazer. So they stayed there. And then when war came in 1992, they decided to turn the synagogue into a free and open house for everyone, which is what they did at their initiative. It was sponsored and funded by JDC and World Jewish Relief, but also, and this is interesting that Yehiel didn't mention, is that ad hoc, out of the ground, Friends of La Benevolencia societies popped up all over Europe. La Benevolencia means goodwill in Ladino, which is the name of the Jewish community of Sarajevo. And I was running around Europe speaking in Zurich, and in corporate offices in the Netherlands and in Berlin and in Vienna. And people were simply coming out and raising money and sending it to Sarajevo because the Jewish community of Sarajevo was trusted by everybody.
Right. And what was amazing to me was that essentially they were able to get everybody they needed, or pretty much needed to get out, they got out. So it wasn't as if the Jews were there and to maintain goodwill with their neighbors, they were doing something. In other words, the Jews had already been evacuated, most of them or many of them. And then just because they were able to do it and they understood, wait a minute, the only people who are able to be trusted by all sides are us. Therefore, we have this responsibility to help our neighbors that we were living with and did it, no?
And that's
remarkable.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And so they did. So for the 44 months of the siege, the Jewish Community Center ran pharmacies where everything in it was free. They had a soup kitchen where people could come. The Soros Foundation was sending in boxes.
Again, non-Jews, all for non-Jews.
All for non-Jews. There were 54 volunteers who came to the synagogue every day. They were paid a bowl of watery gruel for lunch, which is what everybody got. And there was even a post office, the Jewish post office of Sarajevo, because the Bosnian Serbs refused to let the post in. But the Jewish community, they had their big white, as you heard from Yehiel Bar Chaim, a big white truck that came in and out of Sarajevo with a big menorah on the side. That was purchased with money from the Netherlands, from the Friends of La Benevolencia Netherlands. So they bought the truck, they sent it back and forth, and they would bring in the mail for the city. In the synagogue, they would write the name of every name down of every letter, print it out on an old printer, and stick it on the outside of the synagogue. People would come there and see if they had a letter, and they'd go inside, get the letter, stand outside, and usually just stand there and cry because someone had cared enough to bring them a letter from the outside. They even had a stamp that they did, because everything was done. And by the way, we have to thank the Jewish communities of Belgrade, Zagreb, and Split, because they helped all the logistics with all of this. The ones in JDC couldn't have done it without the help of World Jewish Relief, which couldn't have done it without the team running the community in Sarajevo, Jakub Finci, Danilo Nikolic, and Ivica Čerežnja, just to make sure they don't hate me, to mention them, and plenty of other people in Zagreb, Belgrade, and Split too.
No, it's to me one of the amazing stories of the last half century in terms of Jewish absolute altruism. And not only just altruism as, oh, we have money, let's help some people that are needy, which is important, but you're talking about wartime conditions, that all of this didn't have to go on. In other words, these people were doing it, it was a very dangerous situation. An amazing story that is, it's not that it's untold, but it's certainly an undertold, and it's a beautiful story. It really is a beautiful story. So talk about your role. What was your tafkid? What's your tafkid there? What was your role there? Ed, what were you doing? Taking photos.
Well, Jelton said you really should go, and I said, well, I'm not really going to go. But at that time, it just so happened that Sylvia Hershkovitz of the Yeshiva University Museum wanted me to go to Dubrovnik and document everything in the synagogue, because the synagogue had basically escaped any damage during the bombing of Dubrovnik for more than 6 months, but they wanted to document it. And I said, well, that's an easy job. I'll go do that. I spent a week there doing that. I was the only tourist. I wasn't really a tourist, the only tourist in all of Dubrovnik. I mean, the only one.
It's like these days.
There was a woman that had a fish restaurant that I used to go to, and I would go there and I said, are you open? She said, of course I'm not open. She said, but if you will promise you'll come tonight, then you'll sit with my family and we'll watch a movie and we'll sit at the table. So she had VHS tapes, and we watched Woody Allen movies and ate fish, grilled fish. And so I spent the night in Zagreb, and I was changing planes there. Ivica Čerežnja, one of the heads of the Jewish community, a man I deeply respect, a very cynical, very wonderful man. I was going into my cheap little hotel room in Zagreb, and coming out of the next cheap hotel room, the next room down the hall was Ivica. And he looked at me like a teacher looks at a student who had potential and failed. And he went, so you made that first book, Out of the Shadows, and you came to Sarajevo, and we were glad to help you. And I hope you made a little money, but we actually need you now. And I said, well, Ivica, I don't want to go into a war zone. I have an allergy. And he said, to what? I said, bullets. And he said, oh, that's all right. We have aspirin for that. And he completely disarmed me. And the next day I had a flak jacket on and a helmet, and I was going into Sarajevo. And my role was over 5 visits between November 1993 and April 1995, and the visits I made for about 45 days, is I documented the Jewish community. I interviewed people, I wrote about it, and I published a book in 1994. It came out as Survival in Sarajevo. It actually sold, and putting out a book in the middle of a war, it's always good. I then ended up making a film for ABC News Nightline on searching for the Sarajevo Haggadah, and then that led to more films for Nightline. But it was it's certainly one of the highlights of my life being there. And it was the highlight of my life for 2 reasons. One, everything you wanted to know about, and you want to be careful about this kind of thing. Jewish values are the same thing as any humanistic values, for goodness sake. There's no, whether you're, today is Assumption Day for the Orthodox Church. Our values are not better than anybody else's, but nevertheless, it was inspiring to me as a Jew to see Holocaust survivors running a humanitarian aid agency side by side with Muslims. That was magnificent. So that was one thing. And the other reason I enjoyed, and I don't want to, that's the wrong word, that was important to be there, was man has always had war, man will always have war. And to be in a war zone, a kid from Savannah, Georgia, walking along streets that were bombed out houses, and a city plunged into darkness, and broken telephone wires and burnt out trams, just to be there walking through. I said, this is a privilege. I get to see history as I will never get to see it again, I hope. And so I did.
Amazing. Amazing. You know, I've never been to Sarajevo. Ellen Germain, do you know Ellen? So Ellen Germain, do you know Ellen? She was the consul general in Krakow 7, 8 years ago, maybe, and she's now the deputy ambassador and she's in Sarajevo. She's going to finish it certainly in the next few months. She's going to take on her next role, but I very much wanted to visit her, and then of course Corona's taken most of that time. Not use Corona. People be using Corona for the excuse of, oh, for the last 5 years I haven't visited somebody, but Corona sort of stressing out. But it's one of the places on my short list of places that I haven't been in Europe that I really want to go.
You want to be there, and we're going to try to do all sorts of stuff, including another big teacher seminar conference, and also I'm hoping to get the funding to make a documentary just on the story of La Benevolencia and oral history, because next May in 2022, that will be the 30th anniversary of the beginning of the siege. So there will be all sorts of events, and that is a big thing for La Benevolencia. And
I will meet you there, Ed.
Inshallah.
Ed, you're now running Centropa, which is a fantastic organization. You're doing such cool stuff and all different stuff. Maybe talk a little bit about Centropa. First of all, you started in 2000, so 21 years, 21 years of Centropa. How did you start? First of all, what is it? And then how did you start it? What was the impetus for that?
I will say this, that by the year 1999, I had now been photographing and writing about Jews in Central and Eastern Europe for 15 years. I'd met so many people and lost so many.
Were you already based in Vienna?
By 97, I was based in Vienna. Before that, I moved to Budapest in 88, and then Berlin in 91, and Vienna in 97. And by 1999, I had lost so many of these people, and it was really something painful. To know all the wonderful stories that were being missed, and I was photographing them. And then I was also making films for Nightline. And one of I was doing a film for Nightline in 1999 that I didn't have a cameraman, I had to shoot it myself. And I was teaching myself how to shoot video. And it was a film about a Jewish old age home and a soup kitchen in a town called Arad. And I went there because they were such fabulous cooks, and I could watch them cook. And there were Hungarians, Romanians, etc. I would go home with the old people, these old Jews. They would sit in front of they would pull out a family album, and they would tell me stories and show me pictures. I said, oh, look at this. Here's an officer in the the Austro-Hungarian army. She said, that was no officer. That was my uncle Lajos. She was a Luftmensch. I said, really? Well, that's, but he looks like an officer. He stole that uniform. He was looking for a rich bride. I said, well, did he find a rich bride? She said, yes. He owned the first Buick dealership in Central Europe. And then I said, and who is this? That's Aunt Olga. Oh, was she a heartbreaker? She was an opera singer. One day she got a carpet rolled up and she had it unrolled, and there was her ex-lover with a bullet in his head and with a note on his chest saying, you did this to me. And I'm saying to myself, who collects stories like this? And the answer is nobody. And I was cutting my film in Budapest, and I met two young Jewish historians, and they had both just seen their grandfather's Shoah Foundation, Spielberg Foundation video interviews, which they adored. Both of them had just had babies. Both of them brought those babies with us. We were having coffee, and they said, that's a powerful, very good project, these video Holocaust programs. It's not the only thing I want to show my children. And I said, well, that's funny. Your grandfathers are still alive? I said, yes. I said, do they have old photographs, your grandfather? Yes. I said, do they tell stories about them? They never stop. I went, we're going to make a deal. So Centropa was started in the year 2000, based in Budapest and in Vienna, to go to the oldest living Jews still living in Central and Eastern Europe, to talk with them, create a methodology for interviewing them, not use video, but collect their family pictures, scan them, get them to talk about their lives. And by the time we stopped our interviewing in 2009, we'd invested something like $5 million. And we had interviewed 1,230 people in 15 countries. We digitized 25,600 and something photographs, 45,000 pages of interview in original languages, and 2,900 cassette tapes that have netted around 4,900 something hours of digitized stories.
I'm interested in this, something you sort of touched on with the Shoah, looking at the sort of what the Shoah Foundation has done, which is remarkable. But this idea that it almost seems to me like maybe it's obvious, like we as a society, oh, it's obvious that we need to interview these people to record their memories because of what they went through, something traumatic like that. But it seems like maybe as a society, we wouldn't necessarily see the necessity for recording people that hadn't gone through necessarily that they've gone through that. I mean, maybe some have, but in other words, this idea of recording something that isn't related to trauma, that just to say these people that they're, you know, that it seems like if there's the absolute impetus of because of the Holocaust, then people should be recorded. But without the Holocaust, it sort of seems, that's just not, you know what I mean? Not less. Why would you do that? In other words, have this.
Well, because
no, I get it. Why? I'm just saying that it seems
right.
like no question.
My answer is that long before I began as a photographer, back when I used to make a living when I was young, I used to collect photography. And the photography I liked was documentary photography. And I liked the fact that it told us a story. And that is one of the impetuses I had, that going to old Jews, the oldest Jews in Central and Eastern Europe, and asking them to paint a picture for us of the entire century just as they lived it. And in Krakow, we right across from you, we interviewed Tosha Stilbering at number 21 Midova Street.
Directly across.
And Tosha gave this wonderful interview, and she spent hours with Margot-Jacques Bijon, the interviewer. And having her tell the entire, her life of the entire century was just remarkable. And all of the stories we have in Poland, and now we have this exhibition at the Galicia Jewish Museum called 10 Polish Cities, 10 Jewish Stories. And we could tell the story because every one of these people told us about their lives from the 1920s through 2005, around the time when we lost them. And it's important.
So as we, before, because we have just a few more minutes, and I want to talk more about Centropa. So you finished all the interviews by 2009. So then since then, it's been a question of what to do with the interviews, right? How to use them. So maybe talk a little bit about that, because you're doing really great work in terms of education and teacher training and stuff. I think it's very important work.
Well, well, first, thanks. One of the most important things that we do, one of the things is trying to find the right home, academic home for Centropa's archive, but that's not so easy to do. We're trying to find the right marriage with the right institution. So we're talking to them in Europe, we're talking to them in Israel, we're talking to them in the United States. Suffice it to say that anybody who knows anything about oral histories wants this archive, I'm pleased to say. So, but finding the right partners is not so easy, but we'll find it. It was in 2005 that actually, once our website went live in 2003, and we were written up in the New York Times, there was a 7-page piece in the Times of London Sunday magazine. We were written up in the Guardian. We were on NPR twice. It's at Haaretz. Tom Segev, the historian, said this could be one of the biggest Jewish museums in the world. Which is not quite true, but it was good to have Tom Segev say it. And as soon as we started doing this, teachers started writing in saying, well, could I do this with your archive? Could I do that? I never planned to get into education. Huh. But teachers but I come from way back. I come from a marketing background. And what you do is you listen to your customers. I mean, you've basically built an entire institution around that.
Well, unless you're Apple, in which case you decide what your customers need and then sell it to them.
Yes, and they seem to always want it. But that's
most of us have to listen to our customers.
Yes, most of us have to listen to our customers. And so by listening to school teachers, I found that we could get into education. We had some grants to bring some teachers over to Central and Eastern Europe. I had some ideas, and yet they completely rewrote what we were doing. They said, no, you need to understand, if I'm going to use this for my students, we'll do this. Now, one of the most exciting things was that when we brought over teachers from American Jewish schools in 2007, I introduced them to some public school teachers in Europe, and they were all exchanging ideas and creating partnerships. And I said, who does that? And Centropa's model is that we work in very strongly in about 9 European countries. We invest mostly through European Union and German government grants, around $300,000 a year in Holocaust education in places, basically in the lands where the Holocaust took place. And that is what we want more than anything. We feel is critically important, that the Jewish memory of these towns and these cities where there are very few Jews left, that people there, the locals, feel that it's their story, that it's something they should be proud of, that they carry it forward. And I just got off a call just now. The reason I was almost late for this is that we're working on a new grant proposal for the European Union on how to use Jewish cemeteries to go into the cemeteries where the teachers bring their students, and they finally get to know what the hell the thing is about. And we started this a year and a half ago, and the kids love it, and the students it's like unlocking a key of heritage that they didn't know what to do with, and we're doing that. In Poland, we have to give a shout out to Kuba Nowakowski and the team at the Galicia Jewish Museum, and we do our seminars in Poland, most of which are funded by the Toby Foundation, which has been extremely helpful to us in all of our work in Poland. We always bring our teachers for Friday night to your JCC, which our Polish teachers find. We're asking about which film of ours did you find the highlight, which walking tour, which lecture. We like the Shabbos at the JCC most.
I'll tell you what, I missed the Shabbos at the JCC, as do we all. Ed, you're doing such amazing work, and your life has been fascinating. And Centropa, I encourage everybody who's watching, and we'll put it out on YouTube, and we'll have it there forever, for centropa.org, to see all really phenomenal resource, and just phenomenal, absolutely doing great work in Europe. And listen, we talk about anti-Semitism, and as an American people, as Jewish people, but as Jewish Americans particularly, I think we're really so focused on anti-Semitism. And one of the main ways to combat anti-Semitism is to do exactly what Centropa is doing, which is to go to the teachers, teach the teachers how to teach, and teach about the Jewish people, and teach all these things, and also about the Holocaust, but not only, and to learn about this, and to help raise tolerant, open-minded children. So thank you for that. Ed, a few more questions as I get ready to go. One is, are you Team Latka or Team Hamantash?
Oh, Latka.
Yeah, clearly.
I can't believe that's a serious question.
It is
all that gummy dough that gets that never quite bakes through.
Some people, I have to be fair. Some people, I personally am also on Team Latka. But as the one who in this part of the world does the Latka Hamantash debate, the director of the institution that sponsors it, I have to be somewhat open-minded, and at least feign impartiality. So, and your 3 favorite, again, films that you've made don't count. 3 favorite films, Ed Sirota.
Wow. My 3 favorite films, I think that one of the golden ages of American cinema history have been through the 1970s. And I would say in my list, and oddly enough, they have one actress in them, and that's Faye Dunaway. And my favorite is Patty Chayefsky's Network, which I still find it's dated in some ways, but it's jaw-dropping. And then Chinatown by Roman Polanski, I think, is a brilliant film, and holds up even today. And although it's modest in its scale, but 3 Days of the Condor with Faye Dunaway and Robert Redford. and Max von Sydow. I forgot who directed it. It might have been either Alan Pakula or Sidney Lumet. I can't remember, but it was great. And also, to a certain degree, I'm just now reading The Making of Midnight Cowboy by Glenn Frankel, who used to be a Washington Post reporter and writes these brilliant deep dives into film, about how a film was made. And this has just come out.
Midnight Cowboy.
Yeah, that's some film.
That is the 70s. I would agree with you, Ed, about the 70s. And I was, as a child, more of the 80s that were, I think, a horrible, lost, in many ways, lost decade. But I would say that 70s cinema, without question, is no question. Ed Sirota, great to see you in this sense. I feel like we'll just have to continue this conversation in Cheryl and Phil's kitchen at some point, hopefully soon.
Hopefully soon.
Chag Sameach, Ed. Be well.
Yes, have a wonderful Passover.
Listen, Pesach to you, and see you soon. Chag Sameach, everybody. Be well. Thank you, Ed.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.